Welcome back, everybody. Please be seated for the afternoon session. Like we said before, we have a substitute presenter on our next presentation. We have Swimming Canada CEO Ahmed El-Awadi. Accomplished in sales, management, and IT, Ahmed was formerly Executive Director of Water Polo Canada and spent 15 years in various coaching and management positions whilst there. Ahmed has worked and consulted for IBM, Life Saving Society of Canada, and Red Cross Canada. A committee member with the Canadian Olympic and Paralympic Committees, here to present about safe sport. Please welcome Ahmed El-Awadi.
So thank you very much. I am the substitute speaker after lunch, so hopefully I can energize you and keep you focused and entertained. However, this is a very difficult topic to discuss. I'm going to be sharing some positive examples and also some negative examples. So some realities that happen throughout our sport, and hopefully we can share and grow together. The IOC has taken this very seriously. There is a committee on the IOC that is publishing, that has already published a very large safe sport program. How they're going to implement it and move forward is yet to be determined, but safe sport is the next layer up from anti-doping. So many of the things I'm going to speak about are general. Some of them are Canadian specific, and hopefully we can share and learn a little bit more. It's really important because cultures are changing, the time is changing, things are changing, the athletes are changing, and so knowing that these changes are coming and that what was accepted 15, 20 years ago is not accepted today is something really important and that we have to understand. And there's also some tools I'm going to share with you, some techniques. We've made some mistakes, and we've done some very great things. So I'm going to share that with you as well. For some of you, this topic might be brand new, or for some of you, you've never heard of it. And so I'll be sharing those as well. For me, aquatics has been my whole life. I've been in swimming, water polo, diving. My daughter does this artistic synchro. So water's in my blood, and I'm very passionate about that. So my objectives for today, one, some key learnings, experiences that we've had, what keeps me up at night, and then to share what we've learned to help others. So, and then finally, I like starting with this quote: the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. And so many of you are here to reach the highest levels or to help someone to reach the highest levels. And I think that's a very important, pertinent quote. Okay, so what is Safe Sport? Safe Sport is a cultural and safety protocol system that is adopted by sport governing bodies to keep people safe. It sounds pretty straightforward, but as we go through, it's going to get a little bit more complicated. Some examples that I'm using are actually real examples, and so I had to change them a little bit to protect the victims. So the victims that we didn't prevent, and so I've had to change some of the identities or stories just a little so that we can't focus on who they are. I need to do some acknowledgements first. So when I took over Swimming Canada 7 years ago, on my agenda was a fairly large disaster. And our partners at USA Swimming have an extensive safe sport program. And we called them. And Chuck Welgus at the time was very welcoming. We went down and we worked together with USA Swimming. So if USA Swimming's in the room somewhere, thank you very much for helping us kickstart our program. And we're looking forward to future partnerships with them along the way. Dr. Margot Mountjoy, who's a FINA Bureau member, she has contributed tremendously to safe sport, not only here, but at the IOC level. Cheryl Gibson, our president, who's also a 76 medalist in the 400 IM. She's sitting somewhere back there. Oh, she just waved to me. Hello. She did. I already have my contract, so I'm just saying this to recognize her in the room. And finally, Mr. Marculescu, for allowing me to present this topic. It's the first time that this topic has been presented at a FINA conference, and I'm sure there's going to be more and more presenters in the future and going in more detail. So the Swimming Canada Safe Sport Program. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically we believe everybody has the right to be free of abuse, to be free of harassment, and to be free of discrimination. Those are the three key areas of the Safe Sport Program. It sounds easy, but it's not. And when we get to some of the examples, you're going to understand them because you've probably seen it, you've probably heard it, you may have seen it and ignored it, or you may have seen it and said something. So, or if you've seen it and you don't know how to say something, I'm going to try and help equip you with that today too. So let me just give you a little bit of background. Swimming Canada, we have 65,000 competitive registered swimmers, 3,000 coaches, 50,000 officials, 100,000 volunteers, 2.5 million children taking swimming lessons, and we have close to 2,000 pools that are run by cities across the country. So that's our marketplace. This is our membership. Now, some of the bad stuff. We average 200 complaints a month. Many of those complaints are very simple. We categorize them as minor, major, minor, medium, and major, and then, or it's not a complaint. It's just a disagreement at a club. Sometimes that happens. And so we receive those through the provinces and different places. But 20 to 30 of those complaints are major complaints. What's the difference between a major complaint and a criminal complaint? Basically, there's no criminal activity, but it's a major complaint in terms of code of conduct. So those are very serious to us. We average 5 to 10 criminal complaints per year. And so we take those right to the police, and that number is growing, by the way. And I'm going to explain why that number is growing in a second. We also have 6 to 10 major mental health issues. That's also part of Safe Sport. And a major mental health issue could be suicide, severe anxiety, depression. So these are things that exist in our community that we're addressing through our Safe Sport program. Anyone who has visited my office in Ottawa will see this picture hanging on the wall. And we don't waste our time looking back, we're moving forward. When John Atkinson presented earlier today, everything he presented was not about all the mistakes we made in the past, was that all the good things we're looking at going forward. And so the entire staff in any department is looking forward. There is a problem though. We have to deal with the past, and there are some bad things in the past. But we're always looking forward, and we're always looking to improve. I have to start with some definitions, because I'm going to come back to these in a second. A predator, a person that ruthlessly exploits others. A hypocrite, a person who indulges in hypocrisy. That really means someone who says something and does something else. Safety, the condition of being protected. It's pretty straightforward. And then finally, harassment. It's a behavior that demeans, humiliates, embarrasses. It could include abuse. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page on some of these things. And how many coaches are in the room here? Just by show of hands, how many coaches? Or administrators? How many administrators are here? Okay. And then everyone else is just here. Okay. Okay, so Safe Sport is not just predator control or capture. Harassment and abuse is what we see in the media all the time. Gymnastics, swimming, in our case, in Canada, skiing. So the predators and the predator control, that's really been the main focus, and that's the big stories that you hear in the media. But there's way more to it, and so we're going to talk about that in a second. So I have some questions for you, but I don't want you to answer me. I want you to just think about them. And I suspect that there's going to be 10 different answers for each question in here. There's a Canadian answer for each one of these, but it's really going to depend on your culture and your country and where you're from. So let's start with the first one. Should coaches share a room with athletes? I'm just going to leave that one there. Some people are thinking about it, saying, oh, yes, oh, no, oh, we do it to save money. But should you be sharing with athletes? What form of discipline is appropriate to an athlete? I'm going to give you a great example. I used to play American football. And my family, my heritage is Egyptian. So my father was Egyptian, and he was born in 1932, so gives you an idea of the era he was born. And one day the coach said to me, you're going to do this play, you're going to just run and turn right, and the quarterback's going to throw you the ball. So I ran, and I turned left, and the ball came, and the other team caught the ball, and it was a beautiful run all the way to the touchdown. And I stood there watching it. So the coach calls me. He says, Ahmed, come here right away. So I walk over, and he grabs my helmet, and he pulls it off. And then he takes his hand, and he smacks me across the face. So this was 1980-something, early 80s, maybe late 70s. And so it was a good one. I felt it really good. And then my father stood up with a very heavy Arabic accent. And he said, hey, coach. So the coach looked at my father. He said, yes. He says, give him one more, just in case. So that was a little bit of the culture back then. So you can't do that today. But maybe some people are still doing that. So what kind of discipline is appropriate? What do you do if you see a coach flirting with a young athlete? Or vice versa? So there are some young athletes who get a crush on the coach. What do? Do you let it go? Do you stop it? How can you interfere? I have some ideas on that. We'll get to that in a second. We've done a lot of research on this. So, should coaches drive athletes home after practice? Does that happen in your organizations? Are coaches driving athletes home? Should coaches massage athletes? That's pretty common. Should athletes change on the pool deck? You remember those predators we were talking about? So back when I was coaching the women's water polo team, we were at the Olympic Stadium in Montreal, and there was always one or two people up in the stands with these beautiful cameras like that you can get anything. With the towel going like this, you take 1,000 pictures in 1 second. So should the athletes be changing on the pool deck? Do they know the risk of what's going on when they're changing on the pool deck? And I know this is the hardest thing to stop. So it's very difficult to stop, but should they be changing on the pool deck? Do you have a mental health program? What happens if one of your athletes comes to you and says, I'm suffering from depression, anxiety? They finally have the courage to come and actually tell you that they're having a problem. Do you have something to help them? And you don't have to have a program and a psychologist, but do you know where to tell them to go? Can you take them somewhere? Do you have a retirement program for your athletes? What happens when they retire? They've been competing 20, 25 years. They go to the Olympics or 2, or the Paralympics or 2 or 3, and then they retire and they stop. No more training, no more money, no more support, no more physio, no more doctors, no more coaching. That's a very difficult transition. So do you have these programs? These are questions for you to think about. So this is the Canadian Safe Sport program. We're focusing on 3 areas: education, prevention, and response. And I'm going to take you through those. The red is the policies and procedures that are set by our board of directors. So the board of directors sets those policies and procedures, and then myself as CEO, I work with John Atkinson a lot, or other people within the organization, and we have to fill in the blanks here and make sure that we have a program somewhere in there. So anti-doping, that's pretty easy. The WADA program, we adopt the WADA program, and we have, there's a lot of, I'm not going to go through the anti-doping program. You heard about it before yesterday if you were in the other Congress. Just keep in mind that WADA every day isn't coming up with new technology. So, and so it's something to think about. But mental and physical health. So John presented a great program today. One of the things he didn't say, because he just didn't have time, he can't tell everyone, we have a full-time psychiatrist on staff to help the athletes. So athletes do have personal issues at home. They do have personal issues outside. It affects things. And then with the pressure that we put them under, by the time we get to it, it may be too late. Equity, diversity, and inclusion. So another little personal story. My father got sick at 15, and he passed when I was 18. My mother raised me the rest of the way. My mother's as powerful as any male. And I think, you know, from an equity perspective, men and women, now's the time where we should be embracing the power of both genders. Abuse, harassment, anti-bullying. We have programs there, education programs. All these things you can find on our website. I'm just going to keep moving along. This is the most important one here. So once we get the training, so when I go back to that, if an athlete is flirting, and then there's 2 kinds of predators. There's the one that engages with the athlete, and the flirting starts, and maybe they're 13 years old and the coach is 25. They spend 30 hours a week together. They travel 20 weeks on the road. They forget, or they're not paying attention, and then something starts to happen. And then there's the other predator who does it on purpose. And so there's 2 kinds. But if you're a coach and you see that, and there's a little flirting, easiest way to stop it is to walk over to the coach and go, don't do that again. Don't put us in a position that we can't get out of. And that's how easy it is to stop it. So we've seen it. We've had coaches walk up to other coaches and say, don't do that again, I just saw that. You know, sometimes the younger athletes have a crush on the coach. And I know many of you have seen that and understand that. And finally, the last is support service at response. Swimming Canada is really good at that. We're really good at punishing people, putting them in prison, and we're going to talk about that in a second. And that's a sad statistic. So we want to be amazing here and here. And we don't want to ever use that response line. But we have to have it, just in case. So let me give you some statistics. This is just from September. We had 1 major criminal offense. That's the blue line is the cost of how much these things cost. From major, medium to minor, we've had about 4, 5, 8, 10. They're very expensive to deal with. So I have to put my business hat on too. John has his technical hat, and Cheryl, our president, expects that we're dealing with these. But the reality is, the athletes today are more comfortable coming forward than they were 20 years ago. And so we're getting 2 types of issues. We're getting the athletes today who feel comfortable, and we're getting the athletes from 20 years ago who feel comfortable now telling us what happened. And so this is the trend we're seeing in Canada. you might start to see it in your countries. We'll see. When we take a look from 1980, our statistics, our cost, we were spending around $5,000 or $6,000 in legal bills here, and rehabilitation. We're at around $150,000 a year just to deal with these complaints. And they're going up. And because people are more comfortable to come to us. We've received complaints from 20 years ago, and we've received complaints from last week. And when I talk complaints, I'm talking the major ones, not the hey, my coach is not coaching lane 1. So let me back up a little bit. When we started on the Safe Sport program, we had an issue. We called USA Swimming. They gladly invited us to Colorado Springs. We spent a few days with them. They showed us their program. We said, okay, you know, we're going to develop our program. There's different laws in Canada, so we're going to develop our program. So again, thank you to USA Swimming if you're in the room. And so we said, what were you guys doing before 1960? And it wasn't just USA Swimming. We talked to some of our other sports, hockey, which is a huge sport in Canada. We talked to soccer. We talked to football. We talked to everybody. And everyone said the same thing, that. They'd get complaints, and then it would go right out the other side. That was the Safe Sport program from 1960. And then let's go back a little bit more in time. Anyone know what this is? Cane, right? But what kind of cane? Now I know John is laughing in the back because he knows exactly what this is. So I want to compare cultural examples. That's that cane. And if you made a mistake on that board, you're going to get that cane to the hand, right? So if the teachers were doing that, what were the coaches doing? If it was okay for the teacher to do that, and then there was evolution. The strap. So there's a few people who know what this is. So I know what this is because I used to get it. So in grade 2, grade 3, you'd make a mistake. They send you to the principal's office. You'd put your hand, you close your eyes, and you get 3 or 4 of those. So that was a little bit further in time. So we're still back talking about culture because during that time we still had swimming, right? And so the things that were going on at the pool, maybe the flutterboard to the head or the smack to the head or at, you know, in my water polo years, the ball was normal. Anyone know what this is? Any of the women especially? Yes. That was my mother's weapon of choice. So she didn't use the wooden spoons. This was much better. So then we went through the years and we were taking a look. Does he look like the happiest athlete in the world? Or this guy? You know, or that guy over there? This last one is especially interesting. The kid is holding the father back. So I'm not just talking coaches or athletes or officials. I'm talking parents as well. So there has been problems over the years. And so part of the Safe Sport program is to address all these issues. So if that was okay, how come this wasn't okay? If the teachers could do this in the classrooms, why wasn't that okay? And this is the dilemma. This is when we receive these complaints from 25 years ago, this is the argument that we're receiving. But the nice thing is we have judges that will decide that. We don't have to decide that. We only have to report it. The world changes. That's 4 megabytes, 5 megabytes. It was $120,000. This was an IBM computer. And then that's 128 meg, and then that's 128 gigabytes. So the world changes very quickly. And so we have to adapt. We have to change too. the sports change, the way we market sports change, but the behavior and culture in our sports, they have to change too. So, my first a few years ago, I presented to 400 coaches in Canada in a room like this. And USA Swimming was with us, and we went through some scenarios. And we said, one of the first things we said was, the coaches, and this is a Canadian rule, it may differ in your countries, the coaches are not allowed to date their athletes, period. So the coach came out to me and said, "Hi, Ahmed. I married my athlete 25 years ago. We're happily married. Based on what you presented today, would you fire me?" And I said, yes. If he was dating his athlete today, I would have fired him. And then the coach said, "I feel like a hypocrite." That's why I used that definition before. I have to tell all my coaches, because he's the head coach. He has 10 other coaches that work for him, that they can't date their athletes, even if they're the same age. I said, yes, it's 2016. Do you mind if from other sports, they're dating your daughters and grandchildren? By the way, how many athletes did you date before you married one? How did those relationships end? And some of those athletes are still suffering from that today. Some of them felt like they had to date the coach. These are things we're hearing. So it's not black and white. It's not that simple. So the coach said, yes, well, since you put it that way. So this coach who married his athletes has to tell all his coaches they can't do that anymore. So the world has changed. So that's why we're moving forward. We can't fix everything in the past, but we're moving forward. This is one of our sadder ones. 16-year-old athlete, swimmer, 28-year-old coach. A secret relationship began. It lasted 4 to 5 years. And then it ended. But when it ended badly. And then the police were called. What happened to that coach? They were arrested on sexual charges with a minor. That coach went to prison for 8 months, and for the next 20 years will be on the Canadian Sex Offender Registry. That's recent. So this is a message to all the Canadian coaches, a lot of the US coaches, because it's almost the same law. But this is how strict they're getting, and they're getting more and more strict. So change management, this is really what we're talking about. We're talking about cultural change management. Changing an organization, changing a sport, it's very difficult. We all know it's very difficult to change culture in sport. But sometimes you have to look in the mirror and make some changes. So we're going to use 2 techniques. Everyone's going to be happy and change together, which is kind of my favorite method. Or we're going to do it that way. And we're going to make examples. So there's 2 ways to make change. 1, people will accept change. 2, we're going to force it on them. Anyone know who Jack Ma is? There must be people here. He's Alibaba, the founder of Alibaba. Opportunities lie in the place where the complaints are. So when you receive these complaints, they are opportunities for us to listen, look at the trends, see what's going on, maybe create some training, and then we can send that back out to the coaches, to the officials, to the parents, to the athletes. And so we've built a system to do that. And we use an online system to do that. So just because you're hearing complaints, don't throw them away. Keep a log of them. Look at the patterns. Find out what they are. And then you can make the changes slowly. Brings me back to here. Again, we receive stuff, abuse, harassment, bullying. So what is abuse? Is it physical? Is it mental? Which one's worse? Would you rather be smacked in the head or be told by your coach that you're stupid? Which one's worse? So it really depends. And so there are programs out there. I'm going to show you some of them at the end. I know that the presentations are going out, so you can access these things. And there are some really great programs out there that are good for coaches, are good for families, parents, officials, to help educate. The big one for us in Canada is the responsible coaching movement. Every coach in the country is going to have to go through this at a certain point for all 52 sports. But really, the focus is here. Screening, ethics, and open and observable environments. And I've underlined that one. That one was called the rule of two. It meant always have two people when you're giving feedback to an athlete so that the athlete doesn't misinterpret. So you're not put in a position, don't put yourself in a position where you're going to be misinterpreted. Don't take them in the back room one-on-one and close the door. Okay, you're putting yourself in danger. So in swimming, we call it open and observable environments. You can give feedback to the athlete on the pool deck with hundreds of people around. You don't have to go in the back room and close the door. You can give that feedback, even if it's negative. There's a way to do it. But it's going to take some training. It's going to take people to change, to look in the mirror and say, can I do that feedback that way, publicly? Or, if you can't, sometimes you can't give feedback with many people around. Go grab another athlete, grab a parent, grab a coach, grab a lifeguard, grab the captain, grab someone else, and do the rule of two so that you always have that protection of not being misinterpreted, but at the same time, the athlete doesn't also feel alone in that room. So it actually works both ways, and it's really easy to implement. So some lessons learned. So we have some challenges. We do police record checks, enhanced police record checks, and vulnerable sector checks. And so I don't know, every country has their own. The most important one for us is the vulnerable sector check. That check checks if you've been arrested or convicted of anything. It also has notes in the file from the police if you're a danger to be around children. Canada has that database. The United States has a database very similar to that. We're looking at potentially publishing some of these issues, especially with the swim coaches, so that one of our problem coaches doesn't end up in your country. And we've had coaches from other countries. We had one from the United States make it in. That coach had an 8-year suspension. So we're not going to accept that coach into our country either. So this is one thing that we, as all federations, should be sharing with each other. What type of organization are we? We have children. We have people with disabilities. We have masters, elderly. So we do have people that are vulnerable. We're obligated to make a decision, and the government of Canada has mandated that all 52 sports have some type of program in the future. Okay. So just really quickly, when there's a complaint, you need an independent person. A lot of people say, oh, I can do it myself. You can't do it yourself if you've been friends with that coach for 20 years. You need somebody independent. You're not police, by the way. So if it's criminal, send it to the police. You need that confidence. We're not case managers. We can't run courtrooms. We're not priests. They can't confess something to you and you say it's okay, it's forgiven. Or hear confessions. Let me go back one here. So this is our process for complaints. I'm just going to show it to you. You can take your pictures, and then I'll move on to the next slide. But this is how we process a major complaint, how we engage the police, how we engage our code of conduct, how we suspend at the end, how it all works. I'm just looking at, I just want to make sure I have enough time here. This is the most important part, is that you have to be courageous. And so I told that story, which when my father got sick, and he died 3 years later, the person who helped me through that was my water polo coach. And he would spend time with me after practice or during practice, and some days I'd come, I was 15, 16 years old, you know, your heart's like being torn apart. And this coach was there. He was helping me. But he was tough. He was an old school coach. 20 years later, I was running Water Polo Canada. And I had to fire that coach because of safe sport rules. So it's a very difficult topic. It's a very difficult subject. So, and some of the people that you're friends with might have crossed the line. And you may or may not have to address it. If not today, tomorrow. So it's very important that you be courageous, because we need to protect the future. We need to protect the athletes. Every time I see in the media, swimming coach this, diving coach that, synchro coach, artistic this, sorry, it hurts our sport. It makes parents fear. They do swimming lessons and then they won't continue them anymore. So it's bad for us, it's bad for the sport, and it's bad for the athletes. We have some rules. We have the one warning rule, which I'll get to in a second. One of the biggest things we learned is, okay, I'm the CEO, and I'm not shy, for those of you who know me. I will go up and I'll throw somebody out of a pool. So if they're doing something wrong. So let me give you an example. We had a 12 and under swim meet, and the photographer, who had no connection to us or the parents or the athletes, was sitting behind the blocks taking pictures of the 12-year-old girls. Do we have a rule in the rule book that says that? No. But if it's wrong, it's wrong. So we went over and we told him he had to leave. He didn't leave. We called the police. They took him out. So you have to have that, and you have to have the confidence. Now, I'm not always there, so the staff gets trained, and they constantly get trained to be able to do that. And some of our younger staff, when they lack the confidence, they go see some of our senior staff. John is at events. He's there to watch the technical swimming. But if his responsibility as working for Swimming Canada is, if we have that problem, John is expected to walk over there and ask that guy to leave. That's part of being leadership. That's part of being a leader in our organization. Sex offender example. We had a sex offender sitting in the stands. He raped 12 water polo boys and spent 20 years in prison. And he showed up at the 16 under nationals, and he was there. And I'm telling you that story because there's a little connection later on. Anyhow, I walked up to him and I asked him to leave. He wasn't very polite. So I'm not going to tell you what he said, but you could think of a few F words that might apply. Anyhow, he ended up leaving and going back to jail. And then there's cultural differences. So I'm going to, without offending anyone, I'm going to use my own family as cultural. My father, when he moved to Canada, and as I grew older, it was normal for him to, if the coach came over and gave us a smack, it was normal, because that was his culture, and it was okay. But the world has changed, and you can't do that anymore, at least in Canada. And it will catch up to every country at some point or another. So I'm just using that as an example that culturally, my own family, it was acceptable to do that. You don't need a policy to act. If it's wrong, it's wrong. So you don't always have to look for a rule. Okay, so here's some lessons learned. When you rent the facilities, even if you're coaches that are sitting here, let your administrators know. Ask them to put the stands and the bleachers in the parking lot in the contract, because those are public spaces. So when you rent the pool, ask them to add those things in, and that way you can ask people to leave. But sometimes you can't, because the stands are public. So when you rent a facility, ask them to put those pieces in there, and it empowers you to have full control of your facility to keep the predators out. Don't let your insurance company put in harassment clauses. A lot of insurance companies worldwide are putting in things saying, if harassment happens in your sport, if abuse happens, we're not paying. So don't let them slip that in there. They send you an insurance policy this big, and then they put it in one line. So just make sure you're reading that for your administrators that are out there. Train your staff and hold them accountable, and keep training them. And then you need to support the coaches and the other staff who lack some confidence. So that example I gave you before of where an athlete was flirting with a coach, or a coach was flirting with an athlete, the other coach that's standing there, who might be the same age, might not have that confidence. And you need to support them. You need to teach them so you can role play. You can do different things. You can bring in trainers. So what can you do? There's one great resource. It's called the Responsible Coaching Movement. It's at www.coach.ca. Take a look at it. They have great resources. You can contact them directly. The other one is, take a look at the IOC Safeguarding Athletes Harassment. Just Google that, or Bing it, or Yahoo it, or whatever, and that will come up. That's the IOC's program. It's a good program. Take a look at it, because eventually everybody in this room is going to have to live by it. And then finally, make an inventory of all your procedures, all your policies. What are you actually doing them? Do you say, oh yeah, we have a safety policy, or we have a bus policy, or we have a no driving athlete policy? So, but are you really doing it? And then finally, this is the hardest one. For those that have been coaching 20, 30 years, this is the hardest one. You need to look in the mirror. Can you change? Can you adapt? Is there a better way to do feedback? Is there a better way to motivate the athlete? I know athletes can get on your nerves when they show up late, right? And they show up late to practice. How are you going to deal with that? How did you used to deal with that, and how are you going to deal with it now? I'll give you another example. We had a coach coaching 8 and unders. And in Canada, it's minus 30 in February. Minus 30. For those of you who don't know what minus 30 feels like, it's cold. So the kids then put on a bathing suit, and they walk out to the side of the pool. And they put their foot in it, and they go, oh, no, I'm not. So the coach stands there and says, okay, everybody get in. And a lot of you know what I'm talking about. And then the kids are, oh, no, I'm not. So then finally the coach, he'd pick them up and he'd throw them in. You know, sounds normal, except he picked one up and he slipped, and he threw the kid into the lifeguard chair. And he broke 3 of his ribs and his shoulder. So now that coach is being sued for $300,000. There's another way. Find another way without touching them. So I'm not a professional swim coach, but you are. Find a different way. So things will catch up. 20 years ago, there wouldn't have been a lawsuit. Today, the world has changed. So finally, you don't drown by following in the water. You drown by staying there. And so if you stay where you are today, 20 years from now, you're going to be drowning. A lot of our complaints are coming in 15 years from before, 20 years before. So have a good program. Have a very good safe sport program. Build something that you can follow that's easy. I'm trying to get back to, there it is. Build something that's really easy. Screening the coaches. Did you do a really good background check? Did you call the references? And not just the reference, did you call the club they used to be at? If they didn't put the club they used to coach at as a reference, why not? Call them, even if they're not on the list. You can do those things. Require training. So all these things that are on here, feel free to use. Go to our website. There are great websites around the world. Great Britain has a good program. I can go on and on and on. USA Swimming has a good program. And this is going to be a work in progress, and it will get stronger and bigger and bigger. And it's part of the ILC program that's moving forward. So it's something that's very important in our sport, and we need to limit. We don't want to go through what gymnastics is going through right now. We don't want to go through what some of the other big sports are going through. So this is where we can prevent, and that's the most important part. Educate and prevent so we don't get to that response. Because the thing I didn't mention in here is you better have a really good media plan. You better have a really good disaster plan. And so if you get to here, the only thing that's missing is your disaster plan. And once the bomb has already gone off, the damage is done. So what we're trying to do is educate and prevent. So thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. We have some time to open the floor for questions for Ahmed. Questions, please.
Hello, thank you very much. Would you be able to give us your opinion in terms of the questions you asked in the beginning, just to know where you stand in all this process?
Oh, the series of questions?
Yeah, just like you can pick few.
What my opinion is?
Yeah, just
okay. Can we get the slide back up? I can't remember all those questions. It's the slide with, there's about 10 questions on it. Okay. I'm almost hesitating whether I should answer some of these. My boss is sitting in the back of the room too, so just be careful. Did I pass it? Should coaches share the same room with athletes? Absolutely not. No. I can give you 5 reasons why. The athletes, first of all, if they're the same gender, because sometimes they're not even the same gender. What if the coach comes out of the bathroom with a towel and the towel falls? You just put yourself in a really bad position. There's 5 or 10 different reasons why. We don't allow it in our national team programs, and we're not going to allow it in our clubs either. So it's a no. But does it cost more money? Yes. You're going to have to get extra hotel rooms, and you have to get extra chaperones. So the answers are coming from my Canadian perspective, okay? So if you don't agree with me, that's okay. So I take no offense. What form of discipline is appropriate for the athlete? Well, I think something that's equivalent. If an athlete is consistently late, a lot of coaches kick them out, make them sit on the side. But some other coaches go, you're late, the whole team's going to swim more. It really depends. You're going to have to figure out what the right balance is. I played water polo, and I remember the coach said, 20 times 50 on 40. Every time somebody missed, we had to redo it. If one person missed out of the whole team, we had to redo it. So that was the punishment. Is it appropriate? Hard to say. Sometimes it's hard to say. But I think it needs to be appropriate. But what's not appropriate anymore is any kind of violent aggression. Any kind of well, we had a coach once that, you know how you put your hands on the side? And if he didn't like what you were showing, he'd come and he'd stand on your fingers. Both your fingers like that. And he'd talk to you. And you'd be in so much pain with your fingers that you couldn't hear a word he was saying. So these are some examples of, oh, what do you do if you see a coach flirting with a young athlete or vice versa? Say something right away. If you see it, say it. You can stop it right away. So whether it's a predator or somebody who's just being stupid, you can stop that right away. But if you spot a predator in your club, it's your responsibility to tell your club manager. And they're very smart, by the way. Should coaches drive athletes home after practice? No. They're putting themselves in a position that could get misinterpreted. And I see a lot of you looking at me like, oh, I drive athletes all the time. We drive 3, 4 athletes home. But to me, that's a no. You're putting yourself in a bad position. Should coaches massage athletes? For us, it's a no. At our championships, we bring in massage therapists, and they're there to do that. But this is a cultural item that's going to take some time to change. And I know a lot of the coaches here say, yeah, but I can do it better than the massage therapist. I know the athlete better and all this thing. Your hand slips once, you're putting yourself in a really bad position. Remember, the world is different than it used to be. Should athletes change on the pool deck? We're fighting this in Canada. Okay, so we're not perfect. We have almost like a 1% success rate, just so you know. But the reality is the athletes need to know that there are people up there taking pictures of them. And they got some of those cameras that you see around here that can catch anything. And then they might show up on a website. So better they change in the changing rooms. But this is a really difficult cultural issue to stop. So I'm not saying we're perfect at it. It's really hard. Should you have a mental health program? I say program, procedure. If somebody comes to you, at least get them in the right direction. You're their coach. You know, athletes don't remember a lot of their teachers. They don't remember a lot of people they've met. But 20 years from now, they're going to remember their coach because that's who they trust. They put all their trust in there. And sometimes they come to you and tell you stuff about their family and their parents and their things that, can you put them in the right path? Should you have a retirement program for athletes? Canada has struggled with this dramatically, and we have a program in place. It's not perfect, but it's getting better every year. So those are the answers to those questions. There's one slide. I got 7 minutes. I think I missed a slide. I hope I didn't delete it. Ah, there it is. So I didn't go through this. What keeps me up at night? So anyone know the Botswana Chobe National Park lions? Anybody know why they're special? No hands? Well, there's a few people in the back because they heard the speech before. But they're predators. And so when we put our Safe Sport program together, we made it so difficult for predators to break in. We've caught a lot. Okay, I gave you 2 examples, but we've caught a lot. So, and the thing is, when you stop a predator from getting access to their prey, they get smarter. They try different things. So you can never stop. The Botswana Chobe National Lions are the only lions in the world that when the food supply ran short, they started hunting elephants. And they're the only lions in the world that will hunt elephants. Anywhere else in the world, lions are afraid of elephants. But they became so desperate. And so, to me, that's the prime example of when we close the doors on the predators that try and prey on our membership. Same as gymnastics, that try and prey on their membership. And we close the doors, they're going to try different ways to get in. And so we have to stop them. They adapt, they manipulate, they use technology. They're very charming. A lot of them are very charming. So we have to constantly stay ahead of them. And then the other one is, I don't know what I don't know. And that one makes me nervous. So there are some things going on, I just don't know it yet. But I will. And I don't want to find out too late. So those things make me nervous.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Let's give Ahmed a round of applause, please.